Mr. Funk, welcome to the Internet Wrestling Express.
Well, it's good being here.
It's good having you, Mr. Funk. How's your health holding up? How are you feeling these days?
Doing great. Everything's just fine.
You just got back from WrestleMania 29. You inducted your friend Mick Foley into the Hall of Fame 2013. How was that for you?
Couldn't induct a better inductee.
I agree. You know, whenever somebody talks about Mick Foley, the name Terry Funk pops up, and vice versa. You both are synonymous with giving it your all. Each time you step in the ring, you want it to be your best performance. Do you think there's anybody out there on the current roster that possesses the same characteristics as you and Mr. Foley in terms of just the desire to be the best and the desire to give the people their money's worth every single time they climb through the ropes?
I think that there's a great deal of them. I think that there's not one or two. There's an immense amount of them that does their very best, their very, very best whenever they step into the ring, and they do their very best with their opponent. It's a two-way street. You have to make your opponent you're only as good as your opponent.
Terry, if you don't mind, walk us through what it's like being Terry Funk at an event like WrestleMania in terms of not just how the fans react to you, but how the current superstars treat you as well. The overall atmosphere, what's that like for you?
Well, to be very honest with you, is you hit there on the run, and you're on the run whenever you leave. I got up at 4:30 in the morning to go ahead and catch a 7 o'clock out of Newark.
Wow.
And it was a run from the time I got there, and it's a great run too. It's not a bad run. It's an exciting run. It's a pleasure being there, being with the guys that and being with the young guys. They've got so many great performers up there.
It wasn't too long ago that you were quoted as saying that you dislike Vince McMahon Jr. I'm wondering if anything has changed there. What's your relationship like with Vince these days?
It's as good as it could be.
We could leave it at that.
That's a good way of putting it. It's as good as it can be. And I don't expect it to get any better. Nor do I expect it to get worse. I have a lot of admiration for the guy. As time goes on, you see this production and the way that wrestling had to go.
Right.
Now, I didn't understand why it had to go that way, but it did have to go to more and more and more entertainment.
You sound a lot like my co-host, Professor Big Daddy, who can't be with us this evening, but he's an old school guy, and that brings me to my next question. I'm sure you've been asked it 1,000 times. What's the main difference that you see between today's sports entertainment and the old style of professional wrestling?
Well, as I like to explain it, that we did more wrestling back in, which we did.
Sure.
And they do more exciting maneuvers. And which are necessary. And listen, I think that people would probably, if you saw our style today just reappear all of a sudden, I think that it would be in a lost era, But I think if you, it was a combination. Our style was, when I first got into business, it was a combination of the MMA and the WWE more so than it is now.
That's a pretty interesting take on things. Of course, back in the day, there was no MMA, so the guys were a little tougher. You had legitimate shoot fighters in the wrestling profession.
Well, absolutely, definitely. I can start naming them and name a list of them. You got the Bob Geigels, Vern Gagne's, Pat O'Connor's, Lou Thesz's, Dory Funk Seniors, and on and on and on and on. The Mike DiBiase's, where would those guys be today? Which they might be extremely wealthy.
Looking back on your illustrious career, Mr. Funk, there's no secret to anybody the sacrifices you've made physically in the ring as well as probably emotionally outside of the ring. Looking back on it all, is there anything you would have done differently, or do you have any regrets over the career you've had?
Well, if you give me a minute to think about that, I'm sure I could think of many, many things that I would have done differently. And I think that, one of them would be, there's so many things that you would change, but, you can't change them, so you have to look back at it and live with it. Right. And I have no problem with that at all. I'm pleased with every decision I made, even though that I know that some of them were the wrong decision at that time. As far as financial is concerned, as far as my life is concerned, I wouldn't change a day of it.
Let's be honest, Terry. You've put your body through absolute hell over the years with all the gimmick matches, the wear and tear of traveling up and down the roads, taking bumps. My question to you, sir, is what drove Terry Funk to get out of bed every night and climb through those ropes knowing the damage he was doing to his body? What inspired you to do it night after night, especially, later on in your career?
Well, it was truthfully for my, it was truthfully for myself. It was for the fans, and it really was, and it was also for, my fellow wrestlers, and I think that's a determining factor in if you're going to be a great one or if you're going to be just an average one. As I always, what I wanted to do is I always wanted to leave a town, because I went into a lot of towns on top for a main event and then left. Well, I wanted to leave it in better shape and condition whenever I left than whenever I got there.
What a classy answer. There's a gentleman that knows how to work, knows his profession. All you kids out there that want to grow up and be wrestlers, pay attention to what Mr. Funk is saying. You'll learn a lot. You're listening to the Internet Wrestling Express. I am the mass tweeter. On the phone with us, the legend, Terry Funk. Mr. Funk, do you think there's anyone on today's current roster that would have been able to excel back in the 70s, back in your era?
Absolutely. There's a great many of them that could have. Whenever I say that, I truly believe that. I truly believe, would they have gotten a chance in my era? Maybe not. Would I have gotten a chance in their era? Maybe not.
Who are some of your favorites out there today that you think, could have held their own back in the day?
Oh, I love Punk. I love them all. I do. I think that there are just so many of them. The Undertaker, how can you get better than him?
Sure.
Triple H, my gosh, you look at Lesnar, he would have been a superstar in our era.
I understand you're also a fan of CM Punk.
Absolutely a fan of CM Punk, and a fan of so many guys, Punk is great. And,
I don't know if you noticed this, his last name rhymes with your last name. I say we change his name to CM Funk.
No. Let's change mine. I'd make a lot more money.
Terry Punk. I actually like the way that sounds.
Yeah, I kind of do, too.
All right, Vince, let's start rolling out the shirts. Terry, I got a question here from George Coles. He does a show called Heel Heat Show on YouTube. He was a little disgusted at the whole Jimmy Jack Funk angle, as if the Funk brothers needed any kind of enhancement. What was your take on that whole angle?
As I really did not mind it at all, and it was done for totally the opposite of what you think. See, it wasn't done to bring the Funks down. It was done to try to bring Jimmy Jack up to a different level.
Did you ever have issues with creative or with bookers when it came to certain angles or characters that you didn't approve of?
Well, what you could do then that you can't do now is if you didn't like something, you give a 2-week notice.
Right.
And you take off.
Did you ever have to do that?
Oh, I did it many times.
You
leave, and that was, it was good for the wrestler and bad for the promoter.
You know, if you can, tell us what was going on in your mind back when Junior bought up all the territories. What was going on in your head?
Try to stop him.
Wanted no part of that.
Didn't want any part of it. Felt like it was a decision that would hurt a great many people, and it did.
Absolutely it did. Professor Big Daddy can attest to that.
If I would have had the ability to have done what Vince McMahon did, I would have done it.
So in fairness to Vince, it was a two-way street.
It's a two-way street.
And there's always going to be those few that blame Vince for, you know, like my co-host, Professor Big Daddy, who believes Vince buying the territories really led to the end of professional wrestling, saying that today's product just isn't what it used to be.
But you got to understand that the times have changed, people have changed, and the wrestling fan continues to evolve.
True.
If it wasn't for Vince McMahon, all you might have is MMA.
Mr. Funk, take us back in time to 1975. You, Jack Briscoe, you win the NWA Heavyweight World Title. It had to be one of the more memorable crowning achievements of your career.
It was. It took place in Miami. It was a very special night. It was, at that time, my brother was supposed to have been there for that match, and he had an accident, and I went down there, and that's where my life changed, was that particular night.
Did you know that...
And I decided then that I was going to make a run with the championship and get as many days as I could, as quick as I could, and get the hell out of it, because I saw it ruin a lot of people's families. Not in a bad way. I mean, you know, it's just the way it was at that time. You know, I wrestled 310 times that 1 year.
Wow.
I had the championship.
Wow.
Well, you figure that out, you know, that's a hell of a lot of traveling.
That is ridiculous.
And it's, well, it is. It was ridiculous, you know, and if you look back at all of the champions, you know, who's with their wives today? And that's not meant badly. It's just, it was just a nature of the beast.
Wow, so even in 1975, you're already thinking of getting out of the business. That's incredible.
Well, at that time, you know, it was a lot of money at that time. It was, you know, the football players, they were making 100, 150, you know, and 200, and hell, I made 450 then.
Wow.
You know, in a year, 450,000. That was a lot of money. It's not much now, but it was a lot then.
Man.
You know, you could buy yourself a pretty good piece of land back then.
I'll say. That's what it's all about. You know, you've had some memorable feuds. I got a two-parter here. What feud took the most out of you physically, and what feud was the funnest for you? Well, you know, as I had fun every time I stepped into the ring, you know, and the feuds were the greatest part of it, you know. The Dusty Rhodes feud, what a great thing that was, you know. The best feud is the one you made the most money with. Sure.
You know, and I had, you know, Harley Race, what a feud that was, you know. Jack the Briscoe brothers, what a feud that was. Dusty Rhodes, what a feud that was, you know. And on and on and on and on and on. You know, and we were wrestling in different areas of the country. And each area had their top baby face at the time. You know, and to go in there and it was just it was a real blast. You know, you know, and it was very special to be able to go in there with a broomstick, and at that time I could go in with a broomstick and have a wonderful match. You have a special connection, a special relationship with the people of Japan. Tell us, you know, they've got a tremendous amount of respect for you, Mr. Funk. Tell us a little bit about what it was like being overseas during that time. Well, I was there at a lucky time, you know. The lucky time was they had the Japanese against the Americans, you know, and they just wore that out because of the war, you know, and because of Hiroshima. And that's what they had for years. They would bring in tours of American boys against the Japanese. And whenever I entered into the playing field at that time, I was at the right time as to where they decided to start putting Americans against Americans and Japanese against Japanese, and I just caught on, and it was a wonderful time to be there.
No doubt about it. You've wrestled in just about every venue around the world. Back here in the States, what were some of your favorite venues? Give me an idea of what the best crowds were like, conducive for a wrestling atmosphere throughout the States. What were some of your favorite places?
Florida, Atlanta. You know, at one time, L.A. had a great attitude.
Wow.
That was whenever Chavo Guerrero was out there.
Sure.
They were selling out everywhere, every week.
But Terry, the fans of Florida wanted to kill you.
Absolutely. Riots every night.
I can't even imagine that these days. You know, I mean, walk us through, what was it like to be Terry Funk rolling into a city seeing riots?
You know, Terry Funk was Terry Funk when he got to the arena until sometimes Terry Funk was Terry Funk for days. I was who I was, and that's a wonderful thing about wrestling. You know, is how do I explain it? All I know is actors aren't wrestlers, and wrestlers aren't actors.
Terry, now that you've walked away from the business and you're finally able to sit back and relax a little bit, put your feet up on the front porch of the Double Cross Ranch there in Amarillo, Texas, are you able to wrap your head around just how many people out here love and respect you for everything you've given to them over the years? I mean, does Terry Funk realize how much he means to the wrestling fans and the wrestling community?
Let me say one thing before anything, is that I have a love and respect for the wrestling fan. And I always will have. And the reason why is because they are the reason I can live the way I am living right at this moment. You know, I'm sitting here in a pretty damn nice chair in a wonderful house, and I realize every day I realize and I thank them for giving up their hard-earned money.
Well, I think I can speak on behalf of most wrestling fans when I say it was money well spent, Mr. Funk.
Well, you know, as I said something about Cactus, you know, and, you know, I said that he's a wrestler in the ring, you know, whose face is covered in blood, sweat, dust, and dirt. He's a wrestler that does his best, not only for himself, but for his opponent. But most of all, for the fans that have given up their hard-earned cash to watch something special.
How would Terry Funk like to be remembered?
You know, that's a hard thing, you know, how do I want to be remembered? I want to be remembered as being a good man. That's a hard thing to be, is to be a good man. There's a lot of pitfalls out there.
Well, to me, sir, you're a hell of a man, and I really appreciate you coming on the Internet Wrestling Express and talking with us. It's been a true honor and an absolute pleasure. And
you say I'm one hell of a man. I'm not so sure about that. It's a hard thing to be as a good man.
Well,
you know, I'm still trying.
Well,
still trying to get there.
Well, I
think that's a way that we all should look at things.
Wise words from a wise man. Thank you so much, Terry Funk. We're going to let you run. I know you're busy. Don't overwork yourself. Kick back and enjoy life. You deserve it, sir.
You.
Have a great one.
All right, bye.
IWXshow.com.
Hey, you got the real Terry Funk on the Internet Wrestling Express.